Today, we will work on the second part of best TradingView indicators for price action traders. We will look into best helper indicators. In the first section, I'll talk about the general structure of the indicators. In the next section, I'll show you how to combine indicators with price action structures. In the final part, we will go over the best indicators that I have tested recently. If you're ready, let's start. Welcome our free trading course, all about price action strategies and smart money concepts. This video is especially focused on support and resistance Philip-based TradingView indicators. I also set the table of contents for the free trading course. You can find it on Google Drive or directly from my website, which is in the description. It is important to watch the videos in order to fully understand everything. If you remember our previous video, we arranged the indicators into 6 different places. Let's remember them. Inefficiency indicators, support and resistance indicators, supply and demand indicators, market structure indicators, volume indicators, and total SMC indicators. Today we will fully focus on support and resistance indicators. However, we will not use them as support and resistance trading. Instead, we will use them for strong SR Philip zones, just like in the price action videos. As you remember, we never use these indicators for buy or sell signals. Instead, we use these indicators just to help us to see things faster. This could be great for beginner traders. We will use a base indicator before using the support and resistance indicators. So basically, we will combine 2 indicators today. Our base indicator is the fair value gap from the nephew Sam. I will not go into detail in this video about how to use this and its settings. We already talked about it in the previous video. Just watch that video if you are interested. What are we gonna do with the fair value gap indicator? We will determine the high quality breaks and multiple time frame imbalance zones for possible tradable SR Philip areas. So we will use 2 indicators, fair value gap indicator for checking the high quality breaks and multiple time frame imbalance Philip areas, and the support and resistance indicator for identifying the SR Philip zone before placing an entry. Let's remember the essentials of trading with support and resistance Philips. A high-quality SR Philip should have a strong break with lots of imbalances. We will use the fair value gaps indicator by nephew Sam to identify these high-quality breaks. This indicator is showing us the multi-time frame imbalances and strong candlesticks like large green or red bars. Secondly, a good SR Philip area should have repelling and many reaction points. We will test a bunch of TradingView indicators to identify these price levels with many asset classes and financial securities, like cryptocurrencies, foreign exchange, and commodities like gold. Finally, we will try to combine the indicators with other price action structures to identify great setups. For example, imbalances, swing failure patterns, breaker blocks, order blocks, stop loss hunts, or liquidity hunts. If you're ready, let's do this. Let's start with the unique and usable TradingView indicator that may help your trading. The first indicator that we are going to look at is the support and resistance channels by the lone sum. I love this guy, he has pretty good overall and usable indicators. As for the settings, I tried multiple different variations with the back testing. These are overall pretty good settings. Of course, you can play with it as you wish and do your tests. You can change the number of identifying SR Philip numbers between 3 and 5 depending on how many overall channels you want to see. Okay, let's start with this Bitcoin chart. As you can see, there is a significant swing failure pattern above. You should be identifying these structures quickly. You can see the obvious high quality break and imbalance right here. Now this blue line comes from the indicator, identifying our support and resistance Philip area. You can witness how it detects price rejection points. Now let's watch the price action. As you can clearly see how the liquidity areas keep forming. So our two indicators determined a tradable area for us. The fair value gap indicator determined the strong and high quality break and multiple imbalance areas. And notice how the price reacts to our area. Let's look at other great and usable TradingView indicators. I've been using this indicator for a long time. It really helps me to spot the possible SR Philip areas quickly in the charts, so I can spend less effort on finding them. It's called Support Resistance Dynamic version 2, and it is again the same programmer. As for settings, I have tried many combinations. To be honest, I can't find a single best configuration. These settings give overall great results for identifying SR flips. However, depending on what asset class you trade, like crypto, Forex, or commodities, you may want to adjust settings and do a little back testing before actually using it. With this indicator, we are gonna use the exact same trading style. First of all, check the possible price action structures. I'm trusting the indicator for identifying usable support and resistance flip areas and drawing our general SR flip zone. You can also notice the high quality break with the fair value gap indicator and multi-time frame imbalances from 4-hour and daily time frames. Let's see the action. Now let's see how the liquidity keeps forming before the price reaches our SR flip zone. As for the target, you can notice the little imbalances below. More importantly, the uptrend liquidity zone. Now you can notice how we combined two indicators together again, finding the high quality breaks with multi-time frame imbalances and a very natural support and resistance flip zone. When I was testing probably 100 different indicators, this little and simple support and resistance indicator got my attention. It is a really simple indicator, mostly focused on the recent price action. It's called NSDT, support resistance levels. Great and really usable, a simple indicator. It does not have many settings. I reduced the lookback numbers, so indicator can focus on the most recent price action levels rather than looking far back. Again, due to your trading style and traded financial securities, you may want to adjust the settings and do a little back testing. Before we start, let's remember something. As you remember, markets go in cycles. It does not matter if we are in the bullish or bearish periods. Prices always need waves to gather power to go in the opposite direction. If something falls too much, it eventually needs to be higher to fill some of those imbalances or liquidity zones. In this gold example, you can notice the giant imbalances left behind and the multiple liquidity areas. You have to check all these before opening positions. It is really important to identify zones because if the price falls too much, at some point it will want to reclaim back all those imbalances and liquidity zones. Now you can notice our indicator mostly focuses on the recent price action. You can see how it identifies the possible SR flip area after the market structure break. This could be our reaction area. But more importantly, seeing the multi-time frame imbalances left behind creates the possible imbalance flip zone. And if you watch it closely, you'll notice how the price hunting leftover stop losses and liquidities until it fills the giant imbalance above. The final indicator is just my very old friend. I've been using this simple indicator for years. I just find it really accurate and very easy to use. It is the first version of the support resistance dynamic indicator. I do not know why, but I kind of enjoy this indicator more than the second version. There's no special reason for that. My current settings for this indicator are, as you can see on the screen. I change these settings from time to time, and I adjust them if it does not give me trustable results. This is a very simple and usable indicator that may help you to identify support and resistance flip areas quickly if you cannot see them by yourself. Okay, let's see what is happening in this pound USD chart. As you can see, we have a previous bullish break. Creates many multi-time frame imbalances. Let's watch the action in motion and decide what can we do with it. You can notice how the indicator keeps changing critical support and resistance lines. I'm more interested in the second strong break, which also creates multiple time frame imbalances as the SR flip area. You can clearly see the SR flip zone and price rejection points. All these create a reaction zone where we can look for entries in multiple time frames. Okay folks, this was our second video for identifying the best TradingView indicators for price action trading. I'll be testing top indicators for day traders and scalpers and see what we can find. I hope that this video was really useful and improves your day trading and scalping skills. I hope you subscribe to the channel and like the video. Please take care and see you soon.